Hello, everybody. Welcome to the replay of our effective online reading intervention presentation. We are so excited to have you here, and we are putting together a special replay. So this is not running live, so I'm going to go ahead and answer questions as we go based on the questions that we had from our live presentation. If you have any questions at all, do not hesitate to reach out. We're happy to answer those for you. We're going to jump right in. So today we're going to be discussing the 3 systems that you need in place to create massive results for your struggling readers and writers in an online intervention setting. Now, you're going to get a lot of value from this presentation if you work with struggling readers in a one-on-one or small group format, or if you're looking for strategies that you can put together as part of that online intervention-based setting. The goal here is to make sure that you also understand how we can be creating a framework that can shift from in-person to online, as we know that many of us are in this space where we need to be able to present information in an online format, but we may also need to be shifting back to in-person, sometimes at just a moment's notice. We're going to discuss very specifically the 3 systems that you need to have in place for your online intervention to be as effective as possible, and then how you're going to continue to create massive results for your students in these less than ideal circumstances. As always, it's our goal to make sure that our students are making growth, that they are gaining the skills that they need to be successful. And now more than ever, we're feeling like we need to be able to create these results in this online setting, which is completely new to us. So we're going to talk about that. And then also how we can support you in a done-for-you option if that's what you're looking for. So at the very end, we'll talk about that as well. So for those of you who do not know us, I'm Corey, and then we have Michaela. Michaela is not with us today for the replay. She was there with us last night for our live presentation, but we have worked to put this presentation together for you because we are on a mission to make research-based reading intervention as easy as possible, especially now that we have this added piece of online intervention, because we believe that all students deserve to feel success. They deserve to have those skills that they need. And we also believe that you deserve to have the tools and the resources that you need to be able to make it happen. So I wanted to start by asking you a bit of a question around how you're feeling about online instruction right about now. So Michaela and I work in a private practice as educational therapists where we support struggling students. Most of our students struggle specifically with literacy skills. Our students typically have a dyslexia diagnosis, but we also have students who have underlying language diagnoses, who have attention issues, who have reading comprehension issues. And we have been providing online intervention for years as part of our private practice. So it's something that we had been doing basically from the beginning. And to be honest, we loved being able to do it because it was able to provide services to those who wouldn't otherwise be able to access services because they lived too far away or they weren't able to get into the office. And while we were doing it, to be totally honest, we kind of hated it. We hated it because we weren't able to, just grab another resource from our office library, or we weren't able to just pull something quick off the shelf that we could use with our students at a moment's notice. And so we felt like we weren't able to be as adaptive, or we weren't able to be as individualized in our intervention as we would be if our students were in person. We also love to play games, we love to do things that are engaging, and we just felt like in an online setting, it wasn't ideal. So we really only recommended online if it was, absolutely necessary and if the students were older. But the bottom line is that at this point, once COVID hit, we no longer had an option and we had to shift our entire caseload online. And we have students from kindergarten through high school with, attention struggles, without, some who are more severely impacted, some who have motor planning issues. And all of a sudden, students who before we would have absolutely recommended in person, we couldn't do that anymore. And so we could no longer be stuck with this, I hate online intervention and I don't feel like I can be as effective online. And we had to change the script because that was no longer going to work. And so if you're not super thrilled about online instruction, we get it, because we weren't either. We weren't either. We felt like our students weren't going to get as positive of an experience. We were monitoring and tracking data. We always monitor and track data in our clinic. So ultimately we were watching their data, and students who were online were continuing to make growth, and all of that was fine. It's just we didn't like it. And so ultimately what we've realized is we didn't like it because it was uncomfortable. It was not really our default in terms of what we knew. Now that we've been doing this for 6 months, we can honestly say that we love it. We love doing online. We've been able to adapt our lessons so that they can be interactive and engaging. Our students are getting results. Even our little ones are able to manipulate and have fun with that. So we're going to talk about that. But if you're in a place of not loving online instruction, you absolutely can. You're just going to have to give it some time. Now, some of the challenges that we face. 1, creating content that can be used both in person and online interchangeably. 2, making sure that those online lessons are still creating that engagement. Engagement is very important. It's one of the key indicators of potential success for students. When they are engaged, when they are excited about their learning, they are more receptive to the information that you're sharing. 3, making sure that our online lessons are effective in helping students reach their goals. It's not enough to just be presenting the information. We have to make sure that they are receiving that information and that it is working for them. 4, not completely losing our minds in this entire process. We know that there is so much new here. All the technology is new. Trying to interface with students in this way is new, and it can feel overwhelming, but we want to move past that. So we're going to talk about some of our strategies for that as well. So we'd love for you to just think about which of these challenges are the most relevant to you. What is the reason that you are here today? Because if you can tie into that, we're definitely going to be able to answer some of these questions. We're going to be able to open the conversation around these challenges. We're also going to be sharing a specific guide with you that's going to have some tactical tips, should help with some of the technological pieces, and it has a couple of bonuses in there, including a letter that we would provide to parents. So we're going to be talking about all the different pieces that are in there, but there is a link, so make sure you grab that free workbook as part of attending this training. Remember, the goal here is that you're going to leave not only feeling more confident with your online literacy intervention, but also that you have the systems to provide highly effective intervention despite the circumstances, whether we're in person or online. So getting right to it, the biggest key to success in an online intervention program is making sure that you have these 3 systems organized: your intervention system, your delivery system, your communication system. We're going to take some time to get into the details of each of these 3 systems and how we're going to use those 3 systems to make sure that we have efficacy in our online program. So number 1, your intervention system. The most important thing that you need to have in place is you need a clear framework for your intervention. This means that you and your stakeholders need to know where you are starting and where you are going. So your stakeholders, we lovingly call our students, their parents, our colleagues, administrators, anybody who has a vested interest in what you're doing with your students, right? So if you're in a private practice like Michaela and I, you will have a different group of stakeholders, but always your students and always their parents. They are always going to be stakeholders. If you are in a school-based setting, you also have your colleagues, you also have your administrators who are also stakeholders, and you need to be clear where you're going in terms of your framework. This looks like having a well-organized scope and sequence. You need to have an order of instruction. You need to know where you're starting and where you're going. And so when we do that, what that allows is it's going to allow us the opportunity to be well organized. It's going to allow us to be able to communicate more effectively in our intervention. It's also going to help us in terms of our delivery system, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. When you have a scope and sequence, if you're using things like Google Classroom, if you're using Google Folders, if you're using any system that you may be using in terms of holding those lessons and organizing those lessons, you have a clear set in which you are loading all of that in, right? So it's no longer this idea of, all right, let me take the IEP goals, let me take the student goals and the student needs, and let me try and design something around that. That's not what we're doing here. We cannot do that. That is ineffective online. We have to be able to prepare and be ready for what we're going to be doing. And then we have to be able to differentiate within that framework that we have set. Having this clear scope and sequence is a domino effect that is going to allow everything else to run more smoothly. If we do not have a clear scope and sequence, your lessons are not cohesive, you're not setting the direction or intention, and your online intervention will appear scattered. Now we're in this different age where we have a lot of, more of our stakeholders watching what those lessons look like. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what's important about that is that we have to be clear that we know where we're going. We have to be clear that we are not just pulling resources to hit goals. We need to make sure that the resources that we're picking are going to meet our student needs, but we can't be creating those on the fly anymore. We can't be pulling the deck of cards from our intervention office anymore. And that's okay. We just have to get used to that. We like to say it's like setting your directions in your GPS. We know where we're trying to go, right? In this case, we're trying to get our students reading and writing at grade level. That's our destination. So what we need to do is we need to be able to type that destination into our GPS, and then we also need to be able to create the roadmap or show the roadmap for how we're getting there. It's not just, I know this is where I'm going and I'm going to kind of take random turns until we land there. Now, depending on your training in terms of literacy intervention, this can feel very counterintuitive. I have a background in Orton-Gillingham training in structured systematic literacy approach. And a big part of that is making sure that we're providing diagnostic prescriptive instruction. And what that means is that we're meeting the needs of students based on how they're performing at each step of the turn, right? And so when I went through my training, I was basically taught that you have to create an individual lesson or an individual lesson plan for every child, and you cannot create it until you've seen how they performed on their last lesson. Well, that's not gonna fly. That just doesn't work. First of all, it's not realistic ever, really. If I'm being totally honest, that's very, very challenging to withstand and to kind of keep doing over time, especially depending on how many students you're seeing. But two, in an online framework, we can't do that anymore. We have to be more flexible and we have to be more agile working within a framework, having a clear set scope and sequence, having clear set lessons, and then being able to tweak and adjust based on individual student needs. Now, I want you to think about this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well organized is your current scope and sequence? Do you have clear lessons, a clear plan, a clear scope and sequence that is going to allow you to add lessons directly into your delivery system that also is going to allow you that flexibility to be able to meet the needs of each of your individual students? Typically what that means when we're thinking about a scope and sequence is that not only are we hitting phonics patterns, and the reason I'm going to start with phonics patterns is because most of the time scope and sequences that have been developed, at least in my experience, are all developed around phonics patterns, which is great, but we need to make sure that we're also hitting phonological awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension, both in reading and writing. So you want to make sure when you're considering your scope and sequence and you're considering how well organized it is, that you're not leaving those components out. Okay, moving right along. So number 2, the next thing that we need to be focusing on is our delivery system. Organizing your delivery system is a 3-part process. We need to focus on the how, the where, and the what. So how, where, and what of our delivery system. So the first thing that we need to think about is, how are we delivering our online lessons? Is it synchronous? Is it asynchronous? Or is it a combination of both? So let's talk about these different options here for a minute. So synchronous lessons are essentially what you're providing if you are providing live, one-on-one, or small group instruction where you need a video conferencing platform. You have students live in real time, working with you, talking with you, having the ability to connect with you. Some of the most common options include Zoom, Google Meetup, Microsoft Teams. There's a number of different video conferencing platforms. And ultimately, if you're working in a school setting, you're likely going to be bound to what they have said is going to be the best option for the school. And that's fine. There's definitely different functionality across all of your different platforms. And so I know it can feel frustrating to feel limited by your platform or limited by what you can do. But really what we have to recognize is that we have to be flexible and creative during this time. So we have to take what we have and make the best of it. And that's what we've always done, right? We've always done that, and now is no different. If you have an option, if you are able to make that decision by yourself, if you're able to say what you would like to use, we use Zoom. We love Zoom because we love the functionality that it offers. We like the option for our students who are working with us live in a one-on-one setting to be able to take screen control. We can share screen control with one student at a time, and so they're able to manipulate things and work together. We really love Zoom. We've been using Zoom for several years now. So since we've been doing online intervention years and years ago through now, we've always used Zoom. We like it a lot. They've had a lot of security improvements over the last several months, which we also love. So we think it's a really great option in terms of the workbook that we've put together. We have a lot of specific examples using Zoom because that's what we use. Now, if you're using Google Meetup or Microsoft Teams, that's okay. You just need to recognize that you may or may not be able to give screen control. In fact, most likely you're not going to be able to do that. That's okay. That just means that you need to be aware of that as you're presenting your lessons. And we'll talk about kind of the materials, and we can talk about what that looks like when you're presenting more of an asynchronous type lesson, which is kind of what it starts to feel like when you're using a platform in which students can't control screen and engage in that way. So our other option is asynchronous lessons. Asynchronous lessons are occurring when you are essentially pre-recording lessons and you are presenting those for students to watch on their own time. This can work absolutely well too. So we don't want you to feel like if you don't necessarily have the screen sharing options or the screen control options that would make it really engaging, you can present an asynchronous lesson, which essentially is going to allow you to go through the concepts. You can teach what the lesson looks like, and then you can use your synchronous time, or the time where you're actually working with your students to answer questions and things like that. So sometimes that's what a combined model would look like, where you're using synchronous and asynchronous. So perhaps what you're doing is you're pre-recording the lesson, your students are going to watch it, and then when you have, shorter time frames with your students, you can check in and see how they're doing and do some of the error correction in the pieces like that. So we had a lot of questions around, what do I do? Like, how many students can I work with? If I have a well-designed scope and sequence, if I have really solid lessons, how many students can I work with? I would say if you're providing a synchronous lesson where you're working live with students and you're wanting them to engage back and forth with you, I wouldn't have a group of more than 4 at a time, because essentially what happens is you're trying to manage attention and behaviors and all of those things, which is just more challenging in a remote setting. But what you can do if you have bigger groups, what I would recommend doing is providing an asynchronous lesson where you have pre-recorded the video ahead of time. And then when you do have that synchronous time with your students, you're really using that time just to connect with them, to see what questions do you have, what's making sense. Let's read, a passage together. Let's just do something that can happen in a shorter period so that they're getting a little bit of one-on-one or truly small group opportunity there. When you're running asynchronous lessons, you need to be able to record a video. So you can use Zoom recording. Loom is another one. You can upload to YouTube from your phone, or really anything where you can record a video. Now, the great thing about this is that even if your school is saying that you can't use Zoom because of privacy issues and things like that, you can likely still use Zoom to just record a video. So essentially, instead of using it as a conferencing platform, you're doing more of what I'm doing right now. So you're in a meeting room by yourself and you're recording it so that others can watch it at a later time. So you just click record here, and then after the meeting, it's going to ask you, where do you want to save this? So you can just rename it. So for example, if I was teaching a CK lesson for my students and I was telling them, CK is a pattern that says, we use it at the end of a short word touching a short vowel, then I could call this the CK lesson, and I can go ahead and upload that. And they're going to be able to watch that on their time, and then we're going to be able to answer questions later. So the next thing that we need to think about after we've determined whether we're running asynchronous or synchronous lessons, and we have a platform in which we can either have video conferencing or we can be recording videos, we need to figure out where are we hosting these lessons. So we need a place to share the files and the lesson resources with our students. There's lots of different options here. Google Classroom is a really great option for schools because what it will allow you to do is it will allow you to set up all of your lessons where you can essentially just grab, in this case, this is our Floss online interactive lesson. We just loaded right into Google Classroom, and then you can make a copy for each student. That way they're able to manipulate their pieces. They can slide their pieces around, their interactive pieces that they can move and sort and organize, and it's not changing it for everybody else. They all have their own copy that they get to work in. You can assign points, you can organize it, you can create grading rubrics. It really depends. You don't need to get super complicated. I think one of the big things that we want to remind you is this doesn't have to be like the Cadillac system. This needs to be simple and functional. So I would start with just simple and functional. You can load in your lessons, make a copy for each student, and then you can record your lesson material so that they understand the concept. They can go through the slides, and then if you have time to meet with students one-on-one or in true small groups in that synchronous time, you can go through like, oh, it looks like, we're still having trouble sorting nouns, verbs, adjectives, or it looks like spelling is still a little bit of a concern. We do have a video that shows me going through kind of a little bit of an asynchronous lesson with a student where I'm explaining what it is that I want him to do, but then ultimately asking him to go and do that in his Google Classroom folder. So we have that linked in that workbook that we have for you. Another option, if you don't have access to Google Classroom, or if you're not going to be able to share that because of the domain and you don't have access to be able to give students different emails and things like that, Google Folders works beautifully as well. So this is something that we do in our clinic for each of our students, but that we just have a student's file or a client's file that has all of our students' names in there, and it has all of their lessons in there as well. So we have a student access folder, and then we also have a folder that maybe has other data that we're kind of holding on them that we don't necessarily want the students to have access to. But the great thing is that you can load up homework in here, you can load up the lessons in here, you can load a Google Doc that explains the homework for them. My recommendation, if you're going to do something like this, would be to set it up on your desktop. So get everything set up on your desktop and organized on your desktop as kind of a template. And then you can take that template and you can drop it into Google Drive so that you can just drop that in over and over and over so that you have a copy for each of your students. Other options to consider: Seesaw, Canvas, any platform that your school is requiring. We have heard tons and tons of different options of what about this program and what about this platform? Really, a lot of them are very similar. So even though they might have different kind of functionality and you move things around, play with it and see what it's going to allow you to do. But as long as you're able to pull slides in that can either work as like a Google slide or as a PowerPoint slide where they can kind of move things around, it should be good. For the most part, in the different programs we used RenWeb when we were in the school setting last year. And essentially it's just going to allow you to make a copy for students so that they each have their own and they're able to manipulate things that way. So play around with it, use what you need to use, but know that there are a lot of options. If you have, again, the full autonomy to choose, we would definitely recommend Google Classroom or Google Folders, as that's been the easiest. That's what we've used and that's been easy for us. But as a parent, my youngest son used Seesaw last year in the classroom, and that was great too. There was a lot of things that he could do, that he could move around, that we could see where assignments were due and things like that, and that worked well too. So be flexible, be creative, use what you have, you've got this. Then the last piece of the delivery system is the what. What is the format of your resources? Do you have digitally compatible lessons, or are you loading PDFs for your students? We definitely recommend, wherever possible, using digitally compatible lessons. So being able to use interactive slides where students can move things around. We have this example for you in that workbook so that you can grab access to this spelling slide so you can move things around. We like to have students determine how many syllables that we have. So each of those scoops is how many syllables do we have in our word. And then how many sounds do we have in our word with the boxes? And then we have them go ahead and pull those up based on where they're at in the scope and sequence. So we're going to share that with you, but you can create this. So we just used PowerPoint, and then we use Canva to create like our little images because it makes it really easy to save as an image. But you can make this really easy. You can use text boxes. You can just kind of start to play around and recognize that even if this is new to you, this is a new skill that you're gaining that you're going to be able to use in the future with your students, which is awesome. It's so amazing. So just know that while this can be frustrating in the time, it's going to open up so many new possibilities for you. The great thing about digitally compatible lessons is that you can design effective materials by just adapting what you're already using and making a few key movable components. So in our program, we always have students, interacting with words and doing different spelling activities and things in different ways. And so what we can do is if we had a workbook page where we were asking them to like physically circle when they had, their highlighter, when they had their pen, we can just ask them to circle by dragging up a circle. So we've given them a shaped image and they can just pull it up, and that's going to create the same effect. So that's great. The other thing that we can do is we can create text boxes that can be dragged and dropped. We use these text boxes because, one, you can change out the words if you want when you're sorting different things, but the great thing is that they're all targeting the same phonogram pattern that we're working on, and then students are able to manipulate and move them around. If they can't manipulate and move around, that's okay. We can still go back to using a more physical process. So some of our students, for example, will still use a whiteboard. If for whatever reason they're not able to move the pieces around, either one, because they don't have kind of that screen control option, or they have motor planning issues, or they're really young and they're just struggling to move things around, then we can use a whiteboard and we can have them start to write things out that way. Same thing here, if we're sorting words and they're not able to drag and drop, either if you're working synchronously, you can just move it for them, super easy, they don't have to do it themselves. Or you can ask them to pull out just like an 8x11 whiteboard and they can just sort it right there and they can flip it around and show you, or they can just grab a quick picture and submit that as part of their homework. Be flexible, be creative, be thoughtful. Ask your students for their advice and their thoughts because one, we want them to see that this is a collaborative process, and two, I want you to know that a lot of my students have given me great ideas of like, hey, can we make this out of a game? We can make it a game by doing this. Or hey, can we do this? Be open to that. Be open to that. Another thing that we need to be thoughtful of is when we have our digitally compatible lessons, we need to make sure that we have lessons that are going to allow us to differentiate within the framework, because again, if we have a scope and sequence, we want to make sure that we can hit students with different goals and different needs with the same materials. So it's really going to be important that you can be really thoughtful and creative with how else can I use this? How else can I use this? How else can I use this? And that's something that I encourage my team to do every single day. Every activity you see, I want you to brainstorm 3 different ways that this could be used to hit 3 different targets. And if we can start to train ourselves to be creative in that way, it's going to make online lessons so much easier. So for example, with a simple sentence building task or sentence reading task, we could have the simple task of reading the sentence. We could also have an orthographic task of finding the key phonogram. We could have a vocabulary development of identifying kind of our subject, our predicate, our nouns, and our verbs. That's also a comprehension activity, right? So we can start to recognize who did what becomes comprehension. We could pull in executive functioning by asking them to identify words that they don't know or words that they weren't sure that they read correctly. So again, we just need to be really thoughtful about how many different ways can we use this. Another thing that we can look at doing is making PDFs interactive. So if you have PDFs and you're using them digitally, you want to make sure that there are print-free options because some of your students may not have access to printing. So in terms of making them interactive, there are a lot of different options. One of the options that I have heard a lot of rave reviews about, we don't use it personally, but I have heard amazing things, is Kami. So definitely check that out if you want to have an option of being able to annotate or write on PDFs and save those notes. Another thing you can do is if you are running a synchronous lesson, you can simply screen share and students can annotate and they can highlight and they can mark, they can type, they can do all of that, which is great. The downside is that we have to sort of see it as they're writing on your computer screen. So as soon as you move it up, it doesn't save. So you end up having to take a lot of screenshots. It's a little bit harder and it's not ideal. And in fact, this is how we were running our online lessons for the several years before we turned everything digitally compatible in our program. And so it works. I don't want to say if this is the option that you have, make it work, that's totally fine. However, do know that it does make it a little bit more challenging to kind of save that work and be able to review it later on. And so you may need to cover these things again in addition to the other work that you're doing. You can also have them writing in like a physical workbook and then turning it around and showing you. The hard part with that is that you can't always see what it is they're working on. And then when they go to show it to you, you're like, move it to the left, move it to the right. Like we can't really see it that well, but it definitely works. Our students made growth. They continued to track appropriately, even with this approach. So not to say that it's ineffective, just to say it's a little bit more of a hassle, but it works. Regardless of what materials you choose, we need to remember that this is a beautiful opportunity for us. Like I mentioned earlier, these are going to be materials that we can use long-term. Imagine being able to send home a lesson to Johnny because he was out on vacation or he was out sick and you have the rest of your group continuing to move forward. And you're like, well, I don't want you to miss this lesson because now everybody's ahead of you in the scope and sequence. Being able to send a lesson that's already ready, that's digitally compatible, that they can fill out ahead of time. So don't want you to think like, oh my gosh, we have to figure out how to make all this work for this, short period of time where we're online. We really need to see the beauty in this opportunity of how can we up-level our intervention moving forward. It's super exciting. And the other thing we want to just be real with here for a hot minute is that we keep hearing educators telling us, I'm not tech savvy, I can't figure this out, or give me, I hope this isn't a dumb question, but I don't know how this works. First of all, there are no dumb questions. We're all working on figuring this out. This is new to everybody. And so we need to start using more positive language with ourselves because the bottom line is we are not tech wizards ourselves. I swear to you, if you ask my husband, he will be like, oh my gosh, do not ask Corey to touch your computer. Like it's bad. It's real bad. And so if we can figure this out, you can figure this out 100%. It's just stepping outside of that comfort zone. And so instead of saying, I'm not tech savvy, instead of continuing to allow that I'm not good at math, I'm not good at reading, I'm not good at this, I'm working on this, or I'm figuring this out. We need to be more positive in the language that we're using with ourselves. We need to expect the same that we expect of students, right? We expect students to have a growth mindset, which means we need to have a growth mindset too. We need to model that behavior of, hey, we're figuring this out and we're figuring this out together. And how cool is this that we get to have this experience? So no more, I'm not tech savvy. It doesn't matter. We are working on becoming more tech savvy. And what we want to be clear about is that the most effective delivery system is simply the one that you start implementing right now. It's not the perfect system. It's not the complex system. It's not the most beautiful system. Action is going to bring clarity, but you have to start. One of the things that we always say in our team, in our office, is that if you want to impress people, make it complicated, make it whatever. If you want to help people, make it easy. So in this case, make it easy for your students. Make it easy for your families. The more complex pieces that you add, the more challenging that it gets for them. You don't need all the bells and whistles. Start where you are and move forward. On a scale of 1 to 10, we want you to think about how confident do you feel in your delivery system. We want you to think about the how, the where, and the what of that system. Finally, last one, we want to jump into communication system. So again, your stakeholders, students, parents, administrators, colleagues, coworkers, more on edge than ever before. We have a lot that we're dealing with in the current climate. And so we have to just recognize that this is a trying time for all of us. The best way to keep your sanity is to have a clear communication system in place. We need to communicate, one, that we have a plan. So you're going to want to communicate with parents, administrators, students, your intervention system and your delivery system so that they know this is where we're going, this is where we are, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to get there. And then two, we need to be able to communicate that our students are making growth. Those are the two most critical pieces that we have to keep in mind right now. Now, in our initial communication, we want to make sure that we're communicating again, that we have a clear starting point, we have a roadmap, we have processes for getting where we are going. We just need to explain again our intervention system and our delivery system. We have that template that I was talking about at the beginning of the presentation where you can send it as a letter to your families or to your colleagues or to whoever it is that you need to send that to so that you have something ready to go so that you can start to instill confidence with them that you've got a plan, it's going to be fine. It's not a matter of having a perfect system, it's just a matter of communicating what you're doing. Then the next thing that we need to look at is ongoing communication. The biggest concern that everyone has right now, parents, teachers, administrators, everybody, is the impact of the current situation on students and their long-term growth. So if you can start to demonstrate student progress, it's going to save you a lot of times in terms of communication. It's going to ease some of those fears that your primary stakeholders may have. And we have to be honest, one of the biggest stakeholders who's going to do well with this ongoing communication is your students. When you can show students that they are making growth, that they are moving along, they are going to be more bought in than any game, any special activity, anything like that. Showing them that they are making progress and that their hard work is mattering for them, it's making an impact for them, helps them stay bought in and attentive for you. So this can look like a few different things. This can be some quick session notes, and this is for a one-on-one student. So this is really, more advanced. You definitely don't need to do this. If you have a classroom of 30 students, it can be as simple as sending a weekly email of, hey, this is what we're working on. This is what we've been doing. This is where we're going. This is what I'm seeing. Simple. It can be 4 sentences. It doesn't need to be anything too long, but it does help parents, administrators start to feel like, all right, you got this covered, everything's fine. I don't need to check in with you because you're checking in with me on your time. So this is a great way to do it. The good thing about this is it's just a Google sheet or an Excel sheet that you can just drop right into those Google folders. And so parents can just log in and take a look at any time. So that's a great option. Another option is having ongoing progress monitoring data. If you can show where students are at kind of baseline, midpoint, and final, you're showing those incremental gains for students. This is going to relieve a lot of that anxiety for parents and administrators as well. And this can be super simple too. This can be an Excel sheet or a Google sheet that you've got that you can be showing that growth. So in our program, we have an Excel sheet where once you deliver the baseline, you just enter in the scores from each one and it automatically populates here for you. And so that makes it really super easy in terms of communicating that data. Whatever you're using, just make sure that you've got a way for parents to access that so that they don't have to ask you for it. This is really important because if we can provide ongoing communication around what we're doing in that student progress, it's going to create so much breathing room for you. You're not going to have people constantly reaching out and asking you this and asking you that, and it's going to allow you to spend time focusing on your instruction. If we don't, our stakeholders start to get a little restless with us, and it adds an immense amount of unnecessary stress, calls, emails. It can feel a little bit crazy. And so this is really, really important in making sure that online intervention doesn't feel stressful, that you're able to save that sanity for yourself. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to think about how well are you communicating with your stakeholders. So I want to recap. In order to overcome the challenges that we talked about at the beginning, creating content that can be used both in person and interchangeably, making sure that our online lessons are still creating engagement, making sure that they're effective in reaching student goals, and then not pulling our hair out or not losing our sanity in the process, we must, one, have a clear intervention system with a clear framework. You absolutely must have a scope and sequence. If you do not have a scope and sequence, that is the one thing that I want you to go do right now. We have in our intervention online workbook for you a link. It says click here. You can just click on that, and it will take you to our scope and sequence. This is an example of our scope and sequence where you can really get an idea of, okay, this lesson, this lesson, this lesson, this lesson, so that you have all of that, so that you can be implementing that in terms of putting that in your delivery system and your communication system. Doesn't matter what scope and sequence you're using, but you absolutely must have one. 2, you need to have a clear delivery system in place with clear answers to how, synchronous or asynchronous, or a combination of both. Where are you housing your files, your lesson files, your videos? If you're doing asynchronous lessons, where are those videos going so that they can be accessed? And what are the materials specifically that you are using? Are you using PDFs? Are you using online interactive? We have an example here with our sheep slide where we took a PDF, we converted it to a PNG. There's lots of different programs that do that. We do have an example in the workbook that we've shared of how you can take that. You can use Adobe Acrobat, you can use Small PDF, tons of programs that will let you take your PDF and then just convert that to an image so that you can put it on a slide. That way you can add text boxes, you can add those digital movable pieces so that students can interact with that. Do make sure that if you are doing that, that you have access to be sharing a PDF in that way. You want to make sure that you're not breaking any possible copyright laws or anything like that. So just be thoughtful about that. But that's one way that you can do that. But again, you need to make sure that you know what those materials look like and how you're going to be sharing those. And then finally, we need to have a communication system in place with a plan and a way to show student progress. If you can be inputting data and allowing parents and students to see their growth, they're going to be much less concerned about, is this working? What should I be doing? There's a lot of anxiety right now just around, do I need to have extra support? Do I need this? Do I need that? The more data and communication that you can have for your families, the better it is for them, because it's just going to calm them down so that they're not constantly calling, emailing, all of those things. They'll have confidence that you've got it covered, and that is perfect. That is exactly what we want. So the obvious question for many of us becomes, how am I getting all of this done in the time that I have? Because we recognize that this is super time consuming. So ideally what you're looking for is there a way in which this can already kind of be put together, because some of us are on a very tight time frame right now of getting all of this pulled together in time. I know a lot of schools really had this idea of, okay, we're going to go back in person, we're going to go back in person. And while many schools are going back in person, they also want you to be ready at any moment to flip to online. And so it's really a hard time in terms of that. If you have a program that's working really well for that, amazing, amazing. Hopefully you're able to take these lessons, take these tips, take these strategies, and applying that to the program that you have. Because we know that these strategies we've shared are going to help you deliver effective online intervention no matter what program that you may be using. We are here, we are available to answer questions. We will do the best that we can. We can't always speak to every platform because we don't have experience with every platform, but you can do this. You are so capable, and I think you just need to be able to give yourself grace and recognize that this isn't going to be perfect. It doesn't need to be. Nobody's asking you to be perfect. Don't expect that of yourself. Start where you are and go. Start where you are and go.